Um, and by the way, I am going to send you an email with the assignments, the like 3 assignments, including the final paper. Okay, and that's going to come up very shortly. So this is just an announcement at the very beginning right now today for an upcoming announcement about the assignments in the course. All right, so this morning I decided to call up Dr. Sanchez, and lo and behold, he told me something that would scare me, but he told me he has the coronavirus. So, Dr. Sanchez, Nick, do you mind telling them a little bit about how you feel?
Well, let me give you the background because what happened was about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, my wife had the coronavirus. And so, we interacted, as if nothing had happened. She was ill for about 2 weeks. So it finished about, maybe 2 weeks ago, a little bit longer. And I suppose maybe that's, why I have it now, because it takes a long period of incubation. I have been feeling ill for about 3 days, and the way it works, at least in my particular case, and somewhat similar in my wife's case, was that at some points you feel extremely ill. And as I was telling you, yesterday in particular, at one point I felt as if a truck had hit me. And not only has hit me, but it was crushing me against a wall. The body ache was very, very painful. And again, at the night, part of the night is fine, and then part of the night is really very bad, that sort of thing. But in a way, I am very happy to have the coronavirus, if that's what I have, which I suspect it is, because, that way, in the future, I will not be so concerned about going out, and I would be able to interact with people and so on and so forth. And I honestly think that the whole way it has been handled, has been a mistake. Because after all, the economy has to keep going. There is this business of stopping the economy is a total absurdity. People say, well, we're a very wealthy country. Yeah, you're very wealthy because there is a lot of work in this country that gets done. But if there is no work, you cease to be wealthy. That's the main issue.
Yes.
Therefore, the way now I see how it should have been handled, once they had information that it was affecting people in different age groups, what they should have done is they should have actually called up people in the 20 to 30-year-old age group, which I assume maybe impacted some of your students.
Most of them, yes.
And have made sure that all of them receive live coronavirus.
Really?
And of course, in the vast majority of the cases, then what would happen is nothing happens. Because if you look at the statistics, the number of people between the 20 and 30 age group is really minimal that actually even get sick, or, in terms of dying, it's almost nothing. And then, you call up the people who are in the 30 to 40, which is kind of similar, and make sure you infect everybody. And then that way, you could get a bunch of people from the ages of 20 to 50 that could continue to work and, take charge of the economy. And of course, the problem is with the older populations, children have almost total immunity unless it turns out that they have some other issues. And even people in their 20s, for example, there was a baseball coach here in Florida that, caught the coronavirus, and he died 2 days later. But of course, the reason was not because he caught the coronavirus. It turned out that he had, blood cancer that had never been discovered, and then you get the coronavirus, and the combination, of course, killed him off in, 2 days, which is, of course, it's very tragic, but at the same time, it's going to be more tragic if, we have a great depression in the United States, because, that will affect people in terms of health. I mean, if people do not eat well, if people, do exercise, if people, they have mental issues, suicides rise. I mean, physical issues that develop as a result of poverty. Because, what people don't understand is the best thing to have good health is if you are not poor. Of course, as you get older and older and older, then, natural things develop like cancer, which is just because, you're old. I mean, people forget, for example, in the 1920s, nobody died of cancer, or practically nobody died of cancer. And the reason was because the population was a much younger population. And, I am old enough, I am in my 70s, to remember in the old days that, if people made it into their 70s, they would say, well, that's the end of it. We're not going to survive, and that's it. And it was very rare to see people in their 80s. And of course, what has happened with so-called medical advances, which I don't think are as much medical advances as are the fact that we have become a much wealthier society, and people are eating a lot better, and lifestyles have changed. People don't take risks like smoking, the way they used to take it.
That's true.
And so on and so forth. Therefore, I mean, to some extent, the problem that societies face now is that people have lost their religious beliefs. And since they have lost their religious beliefs, then what happens is, that is this horrible thing that has to be stopped under every circumstance, and so on and so forth. And people become paranoid, and people become hysterical. And from my point of view, what is happening not only in the United States, but in Europe and in many other countries is because people have lost their religious beliefs. And so they are hysterical. I mean, totally hysterical. And I mean, I do understand, younger people dying is something that is very painful because, they have not been able to have a full life or something like that. But on the other hand, right now, I mean, if you are in your 70s, most likely you are retired. And the contribution that a lot of people make to society is very limited at the age of 70 or, 75, 77, 78. Therefore, it's somewhat like the forest fires in California, in the sense that, for several years now, California opted to prevent any forest fire and prevent any forest fire. Well, what that means is that the forests get older and older and older and older. And of course, ultimately, there is a forest fire. And when you have that forest fire, what you have is a holocaust that destroys, the forest like in a horrible way, because you have this old timber everywhere. And so, the old timber causes all sorts of, problems for the forest. So I assume this is not a view that has been presented to most students, but, coming from a different culture, coming from different philosophical ideas, having strong religious views, I mean, the hysterics that are going on in this country are a sign of the times. In other words, people have lost their religious values, and as a result, everybody is hysterical. So, in a sense, I am glad that I think I have it the way my wife had it, very similar. And, I will try to keep a normal life. But, I'm not hysterical about, this affecting me, even in a bad way or anything like that. So maybe this is shocking to your students, but, just so that they understand that there are different ways of seeing life. And, I am one of those who feel that, the extreme things that are done in the United States to keep older people alive, is just not contributing to the health of the society. And, now we have a pandemic, and this pandemic is showing the weakness of the society because everybody's becoming hysterical. So that's my point.
So you just said like 15 seconds ago that the way in which the society has treated or dealt with older people is leading to a problem. Could you explain that a little bit more in more detail, please?
Yeah, I don't know whether your students are familiar with the fact that 60% of all your medical expenses, on average, there are always some exceptions, there are exceptions, but will take place in the last 6 months of your life.
Wow, yes. No, yeah, go ahead.
So lifetime expenditures on medical expenses, and what that means is that those last 6 months of your life are extraordinarily expensive for society, and they cause a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of pain, a great deal of just economic cost to society.
Right.
And so this, in the old days, Michael, if someone had an illness that could not be reversed, in other words, that would lead to death, the ethics from the point of view of the medical doctors, and the students can check it out later, the ethics of the medical profession was that you did not give any medicine or try to prolong the life of these people. So what is happening is that, number one, we have been able to prolong the life of people as a result of better eating habits, better physical habits, and hygiene, so on, and I have no problem with that.
Hygiene, yes.
But, then on top of that, you have these extraordinary measures that are taken at the end of life, to keep people alive so that they live for an additional 3 months, 2 months, 5 days. And to me, that is totally absurd.
Right. If you understand what's at stake, yes, you're right. It's totally absurd. Because
different, it is. I remember being absurd is to some extent a value judgment.
Right.
And
for sure.
So I wouldn't criticize somebody else for believing otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
However, what the other people have to understand is that there are costs associated with that.
Right.
And that the costs, in a sense, are becoming quite obvious to everybody in this pandemic.
Right.
Because, basically, if you are 83, let us say, and you have, a medical issue that is serious, and you have the virus, most likely you're going to die. And then, everybody goes berserk because they are, people tell me they're going to die about 60,000 people in the United States, okay?
Right.
Well, it turns out that the normal number of deaths in the United States in recent periods is 2.8 million people per year. 2.8 million people per year, and your students can quickly look that up in the computer. Okay, therefore, we're going hysterical for 60,000 deaths when the number of deaths, the normal number is 2.8 million people.
Correct. It's unreal what your the numbers you're pointing out just shed an incredible light on the lack of understanding of the totality of everything.
Exactly. And so what I find is, see, when you mention that to people, number one, they don't believe you. Okay, so look it up to see whether it's true or not. Mm-hmm. So once they look it up, they say, oh, but I didn't know. And then the question that I always tell my own students when I was in the university was, I would say, well, and why did you not know that, the actually, you can take any society right now, basically, and as a first order of magnitude, you can say that every year about 1% of the population has to die, because otherwise, we would be growing and growing and growing, at a tremendous rate, right?
Right.
So, let us say the normal would be about 3.3 million people would normally die in the United States. However, because of, extraordinary things that we do in the United States, only about 2.8 million people die.
Okay, let me write the number again. So normally without, now it's currently 2.8. Normally without, these advances, it would be 3 point what?
It would be 1% of the population. And you see 1% if 330 million people, would be 3.3%.
3.3, 3.3 million, right? 3.3 million.
Right.
So, okay. Right. No, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Okay, so if you take a look at, for example, take Spain, it has a population of about, 47 million people. Right. So normally 1% of the population would die every year.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that means is, a very large number of people relative to the number of people who are supposedly dying from the coronavirus.
Correct.
When in fact, what they are dying of is that the coronavirus is accelerating the death.
Correct.
And so, yes, some people would die just because of the coronavirus, but 90% of the people who die from the coronavirus, die because they have some other serious condition.
Like, which inevitably, let me just add, which inevitably is the case because 1% of the population will die from natural but real serious causes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, post-accidents, actually, I am beginning to get the suspicion that at the end of this epidemic, they will have found out that the total deaths have actually decreased. And the reason for that, let me explain it to you. The total deaths would have decreased because, for example, one of the biggest killers in the population are traffic accidents. And obviously there are no traffic accidents because, people are not driving.
Correct.
So what you're doing is you are exchanging, deaths from traffic accidents, and instead you're killing, the older population, okay?
Yeah.
So, for example, in Spain, that I keep track of those statistics very well. Okay, in Spain, 10% of the deaths occurred to people under 70 years old. Only 10% of the
Yeah,
deaths.
yeah.
And most of these actually occurred between the ages of 60 and 70. You know, which is tragic. But on the other hand, I mean, you know, if you have lived 60 years, you know, you have lived, you know, a long life, or at least a long, productive life.
Yes.
Okay? So, I don't know. I am interested to find out, number one, ask the students whether they knew that 2.8 million people normally died in the United States.
You guys, you can come back on live, you know, with your mics or type you know, response to Dr. Sanchez's question, and then I'll read it, or, you know, you can say it again. Did you know that Teddy says I did not know?
Well,
I also didn't know.
How does that change your perspective
Right.
as to the policies that are being undertaken?
Yeah, how does that change your perspective on the policies, the, you know, this hysterical hysteria that is going on? How does that change your perspective? And, you know, they're kind of pondering, I suppose, But you're right, Nick. The ability to do numbers and statistics is extraordinary, because at first it doesn't look like numbers tell you something, but they actually do. And you're right. Then ultimately you put in the perspective. You put it in the perspective of the general worldview that people have, and if they have been pulling away from religion, pulling away from a sense of mission in life, which religion generally enshrines, then yeah, you no longer understand. You can go hysterical, and you cannot act. You cannot even think rationally, basically.
Well, and there is one other point that I want to mention, because, you know, again, people in the United States normally don't talk about the so-called Spanish influenza from 1917 to 1918, which, you know, it has been estimated that it killed from 50 to 100 million people all over the world, okay?
Right.
Now, the difference with that was that the influenza kills young people. It killed a lot of children. It killed, you know, people in their 20s big time. And you see, it also killed, you know, elderly people. But
right.
this coronavirus, you know, basically kills people who are above 60 years old.
Right.
And I mean, you know, from my point of view, people who are 70 should be retired, number one.
Number one, right.
You know, and they have the time to live a productive life. And so it's not like, you know, you're killing children or you're killing young people. So you see something like this compared to war, where in war, you know, the people fighting the war are the young population.
Right.
You know, this is nothing. You know, from, you know, if you look at it from a historical point of view.
It's fascinating. It's truly fascinating. I am going to have the students transcribe what you said, because I want it written out, and maybe on the basis of what you said, I will add some things, or I will put it in a not slightly different perspective, but I'll add some things actually in connection with the things we talked about in our book, especially about retirement and you know, thinking of age as a factor in making life decisions, which affects everyone from an ethical point of view, and all the things, you know, the truth, the counsels of prudence, the categorical imperative, the truth, the counsels of prudence. You gave us a sort of counsels of prudence here, all packed, all wrapped up, and then your ability to do the numbers, the skill, you know, your ability to do your skill in pulling the statistics and making them comparable, comparing them. I mean, to me,
Right, right.
you did an incredible lecture. I'm very, very happy.
Well, let me make one final point, because, the final point is that, of course, the center of the epidemic has been New York.
Right.
And, of course, and notice that even places like California have not been impacted so much. Now, what is the difference? What is the real big difference between New York and Los Angeles? Well, the big difference is there are no subways. There are some now in Los Angeles, but I mean, the public transportation is minimal.
Right.
In other words, everybody has to get in their cars, drive. Okay. Therefore, one of the big problems in New York is, everybody practically have to take the subway. I mean, very, very few people, drive into New York City because they have to work there.
Or the buses, and it's the same. Or
say that again.
Or they take the subway, or they take the buses, or even if they take Uber, it's the same, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Therefore, one of the things to be learned from this pandemic is that cities like New York, cities like Madrid, cities like London, are outdated. They are outdated. They are way in the past because they cannot cope with this type of problem. Now, Los Angeles, yes, it has had some deaths, and of course, to some extent, I think it's because of the, now they are beginning to introduce, public transit in Los Angeles, which has always been, a very minor thing. So, the other thing that the students should think about is what will cities of the future look like? And, should we not impose certain restrictions on, cities like that?
Right.
So I wanted to leave that. And again, I hope the students are not offended by what I have said.
Well, I think one of them is a little bit tickled. Maybe that's even not the right word. He says, did you say, Mr. Dr. Sanchez, that you believe that the younger generations should be exposed to the live virus?
Absolutely, because they are basically immune to it.
Okay.
You see, very, very few.
Well, let me be on the side of the devil here, being the student.
Okay.
And he's afraid, and he maybe has the right to be afraid. So let him not take a risk. But don't you think maybe then the policy would be those of the students who understand that they have a very, very low risk of dying from this virus be exposed to it with full attention from the medical profession, number one, like, making sure that they get the respirator if it gets to be that bad. And then maybe the hydroxychloroquine if it gets to be worse, right? Maybe not, maybe yes. But then, Nick, I would say, just like in our chapter about abortion, where we say, let's promote adoption and make sure that the mother will receive some money. How about if the person who volunteered their, the being exposed to the virus, then get paid for doing what is called convalescent plasma?
Well, except I honestly think that the student is failing to perceive the other risks that they normally face. Or in other words, for a young man, the risk of dying as a result of a car accident is so much bigger than the risk of dying from the coronavirus.
Right.
And yet, every young man or woman goes ahead and they drive a car, and as a matter of fact, they are not very careful when they drive the car, and many times they drink when they drive the car, which increases the probability of death. So, I mean, if you say, well, we have to take into account this risk, I would say, okay, then when you get a license to get a car, you should also say, I agree to take this license, fully knowing that my probability of death is X. And if I do not accept that the probability of dying is X, then I will refuse to take a driver's license. Come on.
Okay.
I mean,
You're bringing statistics.
Is that what we're going to be doing? That every time you cross the street, you have to sign a document saying, well, I accept crossing the street because I know the probability of dying is X, but, I accept it.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Yeah. Well, that's a new twist or, sort of perspective on things. That's very interesting that you brought this up. But I think the student wants to say something. He says, I have something to add, not that when there is a free time to speak. So go ahead, Danny, if you want.
All right. Well, first off, hello.
Speak loudly because I'm not sure he can hear you so well.
Okay. So, well, my mother, she actually works in the ICU. So she works with people with this disease like every single day and like sees like how like it affects everyone and stuff. But that's not really the point I'm trying to make. But the thing where you say that the younger generation should be introduced to this virus, the only problem with that is you'd have to isolate all these younger kids away from the older people, because people who are older have a better risk of like getting affected and even dying from this disease. So if you look at a place like New York and stuff where there's a bunch of apartments and they're all side by side, you can have some people who have been introduced to this virus, and right next door there could be an older couple who have no clue about this. So if they had ever came into contact with these people, then they can get sick and it'll be just the same exact thing, but even worse because there's more of the virus around.
Nick, did you hear the question?
Yes, I get the thrust of the question. In other words, what he's saying is that, the younger people, the problem that they face is that they could, in fact, impact the older generation.
Right.
I fully understand that. Mm-hmm. But there are two questions that I will raise. Okay, does that mean that it is the younger people, the one who have to be prevented from getting in touch with the older people, or should it not be the other way around? In other words, if that is the case, then maybe the older people should be prevented from getting near the younger people. That's number one. In other words, on whose shoulder does this fall? And to be quite honest with you, to put the onus on the younger people seems to me a bad decision. In other words, the decision should be on people whose productivity is low, and therefore, they should not be, going around to bars, let us say, meeting, younger people or something like that. I mean, I would put the onus on the older population, not on the younger population. That's number one. The second point is that younger people also impact older people in all other activities that they engage in. I mean, we already mentioned driving. It's not just that younger people kill themselves, as a result of bad driving habits, is that they also kill older people, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, the question is, what do we do about that? And basically, we do nothing about it. Mm-hmm. In other words, we still allow the younger people to drive cars.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that if you try to be consistent, okay, the the prevention should have been done with regard to the older population, not with the younger population. The younger population is the future of the country. And so, the younger populations are the ones who should have more rights, let's put it that way, than the older population. And I mean, I can say that because I am old and I can see the point. In other words, I am being biased in favor of the young people, not in favor of the old people.
Yeah, that's a very ethical, Kantian, categorical, imperative, tell the truth position. Fantastic. I love it.
Okay, so we have finished.
Well, yes. Essentially, you have you have circled around this approach through a combination of things: the numbers, the statistics, and the interpretation, and then the reading of the conveying of this in terms of what it means in terms of the contrast between the younger with the life expectancy as well as the greater risks that they may pose, and the older who, typically, actually, really, they want the young to do well, but they also should understand that maybe the last 3 months of their lives could spend a fortune for nothing, for basically nothing.
Right, and one final point that I want to emphasize, the current epidemic is not the Spanish flu, because the Spanish flu killed children, the Spanish flu killed younger people and older people.
Right.
So the difference with this pandemic is that it basically kills older people,
right.
people over 60.
Right.
Not 90, I mean, more than 90% of the people who died are above 60 years old. So, I mean, it's sad, but, my God, I have lived a long life,
Right. Wow,
okay.
This is fascinating stuff. I mean, I want to ask the students to jot in their reflection or their additional questions if they have any. I had to silence one person or mute. I am unmute, and now she's no longer muted. But I want to read, these are reflections that 2 students had. One says, it is a good idea to get exposed to the virus so that young people, I guess he says, can build antibodies. That is correct. I mean, that's from the perspective of the person, yes. And then the other another student wrote, I think that most of the youth, if not all, when exposed to the live virus, will be able to go through the coronavirus symptoms and come out victorious. Although you will have a couple of rough days under isolation at home, you'll make it through after 2 weeks. And that is obviously what you said. But I think in addition, Danny's concern was correct, I think, which is that one does not know quite yet how many people might be infected even beyond the 2 weeks after which you've been symptomatic.
Yes, but in regard to that last point, how many people have been infected, I want to bring to his attention or her attention that the false positives of all the tests that we have are very bad. In other words, the best I have seen is a false positives or false negatives of 1%. Now, you say, well, but 1% is just minimum. No, 1% when you have a population, of 100 million is 1 million persons. I mean, this business that all we need is testing. The tests are lousy. So the tests are going to give, crazy results. And again, because people are so hysterical, this is not going to be very helpful at all. The Chinese tests had a failure rate of 30%. I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is like nothing.
Are you there? Yeah, no, I'm listening. I'm trying to process what you just said. But the Chinese test is not good. So what about the American test?
The best that I have heard are between 1 and 5%, and that is still too bad.
So you're saying that it's failing between 1 and 5%, and it's giving false positives and false negatives both.
Well, I normally you get more false positives, false negatives.
Then false
but
negatives.
I mean, you notice that Dr. Burks always insists in when she gives her presentations, well, we don't want tests where, you know, a large number of people are being told that, wow, you know, they are infected when they are not. All this business about the tests are ridiculous. And again, because people don't understand the numbers, people don't understand the consequences. And so the business about testing is everything. At this stage, the tests are lousy.
Wow, okay.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
Well, fantastic. Look, we were supposed to talk about the market, the chapter 9 of the book, The Market is the Best Engine for Conflict Resolution. Can you sort of want to do like 2 minutes on this or not really?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine. That's fair. That's fine. So I'm going to give as an assignment to all students, the fact that the transcription of this exchange will be posted, and I think it should be written out, you know, number one, transcribed, then we'll maybe use some of these ideas for an article which we could post, you know, both signed by you or me or you only, whatever. Okay?
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Nick. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so let me repeat, you know, I'm sure you heard it, but the assignment, we're gonna end now. We're very close to the, well, we can take questions, obviously, but I'm gonna stop the recording, okay? I'm just gonna stop the recording. Okay, so